There's this popular idea that adults can't learn a new language, that you have to be a kid in order to pick one up well. I used to figure that was the case too, until I learned Spanish to a native-like level as an adult. Today I'm going to share with you a few reasons why it can be more difficult for us to learn languages as adults, and ways you can overcome these challenges to learn a language more quickly and more effectively. Let's see what I mean. Before anything else, let's debunk the notion that when you're older, you just can't learn a language. This idea became popular in the early 20th century, but a lot of research since then has debunked the idea that the brain simply can't pick up a new language after a certain age. Instead, there are a variety of factors that play into how effective you are at learning a language. We're going to talk about a few of these, and then we're going to talk about what you can do to address them in your own language learning. The largest factor in how well you do at learning a new language is motivation. I'm not talking about whether or not you want to learn the language. Of course you do. That's why you're putting time and energy into it. But there's one big thing missing in most of our lives that, for example, children learning a new language in a new place have. And that's the social need to learn the language. Think about it. Kids typically learn a new language because they're in an environment where they have no choice, whether that's their first language or a second one. They've moved to a new country maybe, and they have to go to school, make friends, participate in sports or other activities in the new language. They don't always know people that speak their native language. And so, in all parts of their lives, if they want to not just be understood, but express who they are, they have to use their second language. And this motivation is really strong. We can compare this to the situation that adults face in learning a new language. First, we have adults who have moved to a new place where a language or languages are spoken that aren't their native language. This situation might sound a lot like that of kids, but it's different, because these adults probably have people, either in their immediate area or who they can reach by telephone or internet, that they can speak to in their native language. So even if they have to use the new language at work, or to communicate with their child's teachers, or to go shopping, there's a huge piece of motivation missing. And that's the need to express who they are to others, which they're still able to do, by and large, in the language they know the best. And if you're learning a language out of an interest in it, or out of a desire to travel and use it, you have even fewer demands on you to use it in this way, and even less built-in motivation for learning the target language. Another factor that impacts how quickly and effectively you pick up a new language is that you already have in your head a language template designed around your first language. I've been talking about this a lot, because it's maybe the number one thing that keeps you trying to speak a new language as if it were your native language. What this means is that even if you can remember everything you're learning in your new language, you're going to still put it to use as if it were a type of English. But what do I mean by that? Let me give you an example. In English, when we talk to someone, we simply call them you. But polite language is something that is widespread in the grammars of the languages of the world. All the Romance languages, and many of the remaining Indo-European languages, have at least a two-way distinction between formal and casual forms of address. That is, they differentiate how you say you depending on the person you're talking to. In linguistics, we call this the TV distinction, after the French tu, which is informal, and vous, which is formal. This difference means that you would address someone who is higher in rank than you, or is somewhat socially distant, with vous, the formal address, while you would talk to friends with tu, the informal or the casual form. English did have this distinction until about the 17th century. Believe it or not, you was actually the formal form, and thou was the informal. And some languages have a distinction among more than two forms. In Hungarian, there's one informal form, but two formal forms that you have to decide between based on a variety of factors. Polite forms are a good example of how if you try to learn another language using your native language template, you're going to be speaking that language as if it was a form of your native language. In some cases, this will mean that it's harder to remember the language, and in other cases, it might mean that you're not understood. In cases like with politeness forms, it means that you might be rude to someone when you don't mean to be. Or it might sound like you kind of speak the language, but not really. And in all cases, we see that relying too much on your native language template is going to cause you to not speak the language at the level you want to. Finally, let's address one more problem which is similar to that of motivation, but is its own separate issue. And that is that when you learn a second language a lot of times, you don't have enough exposure to it. Sometimes you find yourself in a situation where you do hear the language a lot. You've moved to a new place, or you've put yourself in an immersive language program, or your partner speaks a different native language from you. And these are huge positives for language learning if you're in such a situation. Although, sometimes, even if we are, we find sneaky ways to avoid using that language. We might not make too many friends who speak only that language. Or we might ask our partner to speak to us in English. Or we might find that we spend a little too much time talking to our family back home. And if your situation is different, and you don't have these sort of natural reasons to be learning your language or to be hearing it all the time, then learning the language is going to be even more difficult. The fact is, in order to achieve a certain level of fluency with the language, you're going to need to be hearing and speaking it. And reading and writing are great too. As I talked about in this video, which I'll also link in the description, there's a difference between conceptually knowing your language and practically knowing your language. Both aspects are valuable and enjoyable in their own way, but you're going to need to bring them together if you're going to be proficient in the language you're trying to learn. So those are 3 big issues facing someone trying to learn a new language. You don't have the same sort of demands on you that you would if you didn't have any other way to express yourself. The mental settings you have from your first language interfere with learning how your second language does things, and you don't have enough opportunity to use your target language. But now we're going to talk about several strategies you can use to overcome these challenges. The first thing to recognize is that you have all the power and resources you need to learn your new language, but you have to be willing to do one thing, and that is to be uncomfortable. Speaking a new language is hard, no matter how you go about it. And you might notice that one reason you don't have the necessity or the opportunity to use the language is because when we can, we often avoid it, even if we really want to learn the language. So the overarching strategy you're going to use to learn your new language is to take every opportunity you can to be uncomfortable with it. This looks like, for example, when you hear someone speaking your target language, take the chance to say something to them. It might just be hello, or asking them a quick question. You can even lower the stakes a little bit by telling them that you're learning the language, you heard them speaking it, and you'd like to take a chance to practice. This might help you feel a little less nervous about the interaction, since you've let the other person know that you're just learning. And then there are a couple of other strategies to adopt along with this. The first is to set up a regular event or conversation where you'll be forced to speak your target language. This can often look like asking a friend who speaks the language, especially natively, to take the time to speak it with you. It can also mean making a new friend, in person or online. It might mean talking to a group of people at work or at school who you know speak the language and asking them if you can spend time with them practicing once a week or once every few days. But the important thing is that you're taking time regularly, not doing it randomly, which might end up meaning it doesn't happen. Don't accept reverting to your native language in these situations, and force yourself to try to express whatever it is you want to say in your target language. This might mean taking 10 words to say something instead of 1 or 2, but this is valuable because you're giving yourself experience going from thinking about what you want to say to actually saying it in the language. And this is building connections in the mind from ideas to new words. And over time, you'll get more concise. Whatever you do, you have to create the pressure on yourself that you would have if you were somewhere where no one understood you when you spoke in your first language, or any other language you speak, and you had to make things happen anyway. That's the kind of pressure that gets you to fluency. The next strategy is related to the fact that you don't have any social demand on you to use your new language. There are 2 types of demands we've been talking about here. Informational, when you have to give someone information, or get information, or make something happen. But the second is more subtle. These are the social demands on you when you speak a language. Language is a social system, not just an informational one. And we recognize this easily in our first language. When someone speaks with a certain accent, we have ideas about where they're from or what kind of person they are. So whenever you use a language, you're saying something about yourself. And here's how that can help you when learning a different language. When you're learning a new language, you have the opportunity to create a new you. What I mean is developing a personality in that language. People report experiencing this all the time. And it's something that naturally happens as you gain fluency, because whenever we speak, we're saying something about who we are. And so to put this sort of social pressure on yourself, find people who are native speakers of that language that you would like to sound like, and then figure out exactly how it is they use the language. If you admire an actor or actress, or an artist, or someone else who is a native speaker of that language, you can work out what things they're doing differently when they speak, as opposed to someone who fits a different social role. And this is going to give you the pressure to express yourself in your new language, just like you do in your native language. You can learn a new language at any age, and now you have some more tools to help you out. For more information like this, subscribe to my channel. We'll see you in the next one.